Hello and welcome. I'm Joe Head, Vice President of the Etowah Valley Historical Society, and we're here today, Saturday, March the 3rd, 2018, in the old Market Street School, or Cherokee Avenue School, more familiar now as the Bartow County Extension Office. We're here today with Bob Posten, who is going to be our interviewee for our tribute to Bartow County boys, soldiers, men and women that served in Vietnam. Bob, we're very glad to have you here today. We want to talk today about the tribute of Bartow's soldiers in Vietnam. I'd like to ask, what years did you serve in Vietnam?
Well, I went in the service in 1957 in the reserves, and later on I went active in 59. I went through basic training and all that kind of stuff. Served 6 years in Germany first. And from Germany, I decided, I was a sergeant by then, to go to OCS. So I went to OCS in 1965. And out of the 260 people in my class, I was the only one that went straight to Vietnam. I was, I guess, fortunately or unfortunately, the distinguished graduate of the class. So I had been infantry for 12 years, so I decided, as a distinguished graduate, you get to choose your field. I thought maybe I'll get out of the infantry. Maybe I won't get shot. So I chose transportation, and they needed transportation officers then in Vietnam, so I went straight to Vietnam.
So that was
second lieutenant in 66, in January 66.
So you were in country in 66?
I was.
Okay, now contrast that to the span of years Vietnam occurred, from what would we consider to be the official span of years, from 64 to 74 or what?
I think it was something like that, maybe 64 to 75. I'm not really sure.
Well, I think it was a good decade or more, but how many boys from Bartow County served in that span of years, would you say?
Well, I think we have probably, I'm guessing maybe 500 to 1,000 out of Bartow County. We had, I think it was 16 that were killed in Vietnam. We have their pictures on the wall in the other room. A lot of them have just, when they came back, they stayed out of sight. Many of them still out of sight because of the way we were treated.
Right, and I'm going to get to that in a few moments, and I'm glad you have the photos of all those that you could recover. Tell us something about the service that you performed in Vietnam. What was your duty?
Well, my first trip was kind of easy. I was a second lieutenant, and I was a transportation officer. I didn't lose many people on that tour, a couple. But my second tour, I actually came back to Bartow County. I was stationed in Bartow County, actually, and I was a commanding officer down at Fort McPherson. And we had the unfortunate duty then of operating the burial details for North Georgia and part of Tennessee. So that was an unfortunate situation for me. As a matter of fact, I ended up going back to Vietnam as a result of one of my friends, Steve Bradley. I was called and told that I had to go notify his family, and I told the colonel I couldn't do that, and he said, well, we'll send you straight back to Vietnam, Captain. You'll do exactly what we tell you to do. So 3 weeks later, I was on my way back to Vietnam.
Goodness.
But by that time I was a captain, and my transferring to transportation didn't work anymore. When I got to in-country, the general saw that I had been enlisted for 12 years and I'd been a sergeant, and I had the expert infantryman's badge, so he put me in charge of a secret. It was secret at the time. Now you can go on Google and Google Igloo White and pull up a lot of the things that I did. We established an electronic wall between the North and the South, and I was in charge of, I was on the general staff, special assistant for commanding general. So I ended up running a lot of patrols as infantry, not in transportation anymore. That's when I got wounded.
I want to just, if we can, step back a moment. You entered the service what year and where did you do your basic training?
I did my basic training the first time in 1957 at Sand Hill. And then when I went active, they decided I needed basic again for some reason, and I did it at Fort Benning, Georgia. So I did basic 2 times. So in 1959, I did basic at Fort Benning.
You didn't get it right the first time.
No, I didn't get it right the first time.
Okay, and you've deployed twice to Vietnam, I think I heard you say.
I was actually deployed twice. I call myself having 3 tours because I went back in the 80s to try to heal up some old wounds and discovered that I took that tour that they have for $100. They showed us how the North Vietnamese had tunneled down and under our headquarters. They had their headquarters under ours. It was, I laughed about it, and they wondered, well, what are you laughing at? The northern folks did. Hey, we don't care anymore. It's over.
Well, that's interesting. That was actually my next question. I was going to ask, where were you stationed with your 2 deployments? And then tell us something about the discovery of the tunnel underneath.
Well, when I went back, my wife went with me, and we toured around as much as we could in a taxi, actually, and they were friendly. The Vietnamese were very friendly people. They were open to us, and we found, we went to one of their flea markets. They had all kinds of stuff, cigarette lighters from veterans. I think about half of them were knockoffs and weren't real, dog tags and stuff like that they were selling. But I took that tour, and they showed me the tunnel, and I actually, they're shorter than we are. I had to actually, as short as I am, I had to scrunch down to get in the tunnel. So, but I did take the tour, and it was interesting.
So the tunnel was literally under your headquarters, the camp headquarters there?
Actually was. And I have a lot of respect for them for their perseverance and diligence. And
What was the distance of the tunnel, and were there any large rooms in it?
Actually, it was quite a large room. It must have taken them years to do that. It was as big as this room.
So about 20 by 20, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And what was that room used for?
They had their maps. They still had some of the maps showing what they were going to do, and
So had furniture in there?
had some antique-looking stuff that they made.
And electricity or kerosene lamps?
No,
batteries?
they had lamps. They had lamps.
Electric or
No, just
kerosene
kerosene
or battery?
whatever it was, and some battery stuff.
Okay, and so they used that tunnel and that room to spy, if you will, on your movements.
Yes, and I'm sure they had, when we were there, we had them come in and do our laundry at base camp, and we had maids, and I mean, it was like the Hilton. On my first trip there, it was like the Hilton.
Uh-huh.
It was easy duty when you weren't out in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So they had marks on the wall of who was helping them, and I thought my housemaid could have been one of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Could have. Well, now, which location? Was this Quin Yon or Long Binh?
No, this was at Long Binh.
Okay.
And I think the tunnels were at Cu Chi.
At Cu Chi. Okay, now, you were at Quin Yon, is that correct?
Right. My second tour, I
Your
was
second
at
tour.
Quin
And
Yon.
Long Binh was your first tour?
Right.
And what was Cu Chi?
That was just where we delivered fuel to that base. They had an infantry station there, and they went out from that base on their patrols.
Okay. Were there any other Bartow County boys or women, men and women from here that you knew in that camp?
No, I never met anybody from Bartow County on either tour. My second tour, I was out with a different patrol all the time, so I didn't make any close friends. I was either out on patrol with a different unit So I went to over to the 101st, and I would go out and put sensors out in front of that
Perimeter. Well, did you find any other Georgia boys in those camps that you bonded with?
Not a single one. The only time I met somebody from Bartow County was when I got shot on my second tour. They had me back at the hospital, and they've got something called triage. This guy, he gets a Band-Aid. This one, we've got to work on him right now, and this group, they're going to die. So I had enough sense to know that that's the group that I was in.
Which group?
The ones that you're going to die.
Okay.
I knew where I was, and I knew that I didn't have much time left. And all of a sudden, a nurse came walking through. I looked up at her, and she turned around, and I thought I recognized her, and she left, and I thought, well, it's over, you know. And about less than a minute later, she came back with 2 orderlies, and they grabbed me out of that group, took me back, and they had me count. They said, count to 10. And I had 1, 2, 3, and I'm out. I woke up in the recovery room, and I thought, I'm dead, because I felt that tingling all over, like after you've been had been worked on. I thought, well, I'll open my eyes. I eased my eyes open, and here's this light. And I thought, yep, I'm dead. There's the light. So I shut my eyes again, and then I heard this beautiful voice. She was reading out of a Bible. And I thought, well, I must have made it. That might be an angel. So I eased my eyes open again. And there's this beautiful blonde, and I asked her, are you an angel? She said, oh, yeah, hon. She stroked my hair. I thought, I made it, didn't I? The Baptists are right. Once saved, always saved. And I thought, and it felt good. It really felt good. I felt like, well, I made it. All of a sudden, this guy comes walking in the room with blood all over him. I look up at him, and I thought, uh-oh, you ain't Hawkeye, are you, from MASH? He said, no, but you're the luckiest soldier in Vietnam. I had taken 3 slugs dead center of the back, and the Lord just saw fit to keep me around.
My goodness, that is a miracle. Well, now, you told me something else about that nurse. Wasn't she a triage nurse?
She was a triage nurse.
But there was something miraculous about that connection.
And, there are 2 women here, and I regret this, but I don't even remember her name. But I think she goes to the church over at Sam Jones. I've seen her there before.
So a Bartow connection.
Bartow connection. That's the only one, and it was the very one I needed. There are no coincidences in life. I mean, everything's for
divine.
a reason.
It was divine. It's exactly what you needed at that time. Well, I want to back up just a moment there and ask you, while you were in Vietnam, what was your assignment, your duty? You mentioned it a moment ago about the perimeter, but let's go to that again.
I was the assistant to the commanding general for security, and that was just a title that they gave you. And I was in charge of the electronic surveillance. And we were actually monitoring all the troops that came from the north. We put up an electronic wall between the north and south.
And that wall had a name.
It was Igloo White. You can Google it now and see stuff that was secret then.
What detachment were you with?
Actually, it was not a unit. It was just special assistant to the commanding general for security.
Okay.
And that was what made the rest of my career, because I worked for a full colonel who worked for a general who worked for Robert McNamara. Mm-hmm. And as an officer, you get ratings like that, and they're good. Mm-hmm. Your career's made. I actually didn't even have a high school education when I went in. Yep. I came out with a PhD.
Yep.
They paid for it, and thank you, taxpayers.
Wonder what was the Mac's wall? MAC? Mac wall? McNamara's
wall.
Yeah.
They called it McNamara's wall, or the Igloo White. You
Okay.
Google that, McNamara's wall or Igloo White.
And you were installing the wall, setting up the perimeter, and then you were hit by a sniper 3 times.
Right. I got hit by a sniper while putting those sensors out.
Yeah, while you were putting it out. and they recovered you, pulled you in, did triage, and thought that you were not going to make it, but you did.
I fooled them.
You fooled them. Tough boys from Bartow. Tell us something about the medals that you received. I understand you received several.
Well, I had most of them. I don't even remember their names, but I did get a Bronze Star for Achievement and a Bronze Star for Heroism. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I called artillery fire in on my own position, and I stayed back with a sergeant, and everybody else made it. They got away, and we did too. At that time, the war was kind of winding down, and we had orders from the top to not shoot first. I thought that was kind of silly. So when my men heard about that, they would always ask me, "What are we going to do? We're not going to shoot first." And my reply was, "If it moves, kill it." So I disobeyed a few orders.
Well, I'm interested to know about what you know about the Bartow boys that were in Vietnam, the men and women that were there. There are many stories here, and you've got a service that we're going to talk about in a few moments, but who do you remember or who have you come in contact with that have shared stories with you about Vietnam? And I'll start with the local draft board had a quota.
Yeah.
And I was a part of that in my day. But of the boys that were processed here through the draft and went over, what stories have come in this office?
Of course, we meet here, Vietnam vets of Bartow County, and we were just sharing stories earlier here with N.C. Moore, and we have probably 10 or 15 members here now, and we probably need 3 or 4 times that in our club. But those guys, and Bill Benham, he's dead. And I'm drawing a blank on some of the others, but just can't remember them.
Well, I grew up on Etowah Drive, and just 3 houses up from me was Dickie Pickard. And Dickie did not survive Vietnam. And then there was Stanley Bradley.
Yeah.
And I know there are many others. Do you have a figure in mind about how many from Bartow County lost their lives in Vietnam?
I think we know of 16 whose names we have in pictures on the wall in the next room over, Vietnam vets of Bartow County.
Well, it was a tragic war. I think there were some 57,000 boys from the United States that lost their lives, and I remember seeing the 6 o'clock news back in the day with the film reels that they were saying about 150 body bags a week were coming back that represented soldiers throughout the United States, and it was always hard to hear about one from your county that was lost. And I think this is a great service that you have here for this association that you have, that they can come here and bond and have some therapy. So how long has this office been in existence?
We've been in existence since the 90s. N.C. Moore and Bill Benham, Sonny Earwood, Johnny Willis, Avery Chapman, some of the initial folks that started the club. I came to it later in the late 90s. Bill Benham owned an embroidery shop downtown, and I ended up purchasing that, and we became good friends, and then we started. They started the club, and I came to the club later. But I think it really helps to talk to folks that have been there and done that. Like sometimes you'll get sent to the VA if you're trying to get your disability, and you'll see and no reflection on females, but like a 38-year-old female that's never been to war, and she's got a master's degree and maybe working on her PhD, that tries to talk to us about our situation. And when we're talking vet to vet, it's different. You know, we not only know it, we've lived it. And I started another organization that meets over in the above the magistrate court called Vet to Vet. And we meet every Wednesday night at 6:30 15 or 20 veterans, most of them Vietnam vets. And it helps when they can talk about their experiences, and kind of a catharsis. It helps them a lot. And of course, we help them get their disability. That's the sole purpose of that particular club. Just help them get their disability.
Well, I think it's a great service, and I want to talk a bit more about that in a moment. But before we leave the Vietnam era of combat, tell us something about the culture when those vets returned to the United States, when they were discharged and they arrived back at the airports and bus stations. What did we find?
That was a sad situation, and some of the guys still talk about, hippies and folks coming up and spitting on them. I never had anybody spit on me, but I did have hippies coming up to me at the airport and making fun of me. And as a matter of fact, I punched one out. I think I broke his jaw, and I got arrested. And the cop had been in Vietnam, so he came in the room. They had me in a separate room. He came in and said, "Look, you got a flight leaving in about 10 minutes, and I've got to take a break, and the door's unlocked." Thanks to him, I didn't go to jail. It was not a good situation, but it's different now. Just a few weeks ago, I was in line at Ingles, and I went to pay. My groceries had been paid for. And I said, "But I didn't even pull my credit card out." And she said, "Well, that gentleman is just walking out the door over there paid for all your groceries." So it's different now. And you're wearing the hat, and people will come up to you and say, "Thank you for your service." So.
Well, you're jumping the gun on me there. I was going to mention your hat. My brother is a Korean War veteran, and he wears his hat proudly as you do this one. And he said the same thing. Many times he could be in a restaurant and his lunch or dinner will be paid for.
They'll pay for it, yeah.
So the same with Vietnam veterans today, where some years ago they were being criticized.
Yep.
That's great that it's changed. Well, I'd like to speak just a bit about your services. We've already hit at it a bit, but you have established or volunteered here some social services for Bartow County for Vietnam vets. And I think it's called the Bartow County Vietnam Veterans Association. Is that correct? And it was established 20 years ago?
I started it roughly 20 years ago, but I've religiously been there every Wednesday night, and only recently did we develop this situation where we actually help veterans get their disability, because there were so many that would go to the VA and come back with a rating of maybe 10% when it should be 80. Some with 50 and it should be 100. So we raised a little money and we purchased all of their regulations along with some attorneys' advice at the end of each regulation. So we know what they want to hear now. We make sure that the veterans get what they deserve.
Excellent. So, well, you supposedly have a good website too. Tell us about that. What's the website address?
It's Cartersville, the Phoenix Recovery Project.
Cartersville, Phoenix.
If you Google it,
Recovery.
it's Cartersville Phoenix Recovery Project. And that's primarily for folks with anger issues, because a lot of people have repressed anger. A lot of folks are still mad about the way we were treated. And sometimes you won't think that you have PTSD, and you will. And it'll come out in various ways. You'll get mad, you'll fuss with your wife, you'll go through 2 or 3 divorces, and finally you admit it. So we pro bono, everything we do is pro bono. We do family violence classes for the courts here in Bartow County. We never charge a single cent. We also do have anger management classes when mandated by the court. And we have a jail diversion program that the DA started. And she's been really good about sending people over to my class and let them, instead of putting them in jail, they send them to my class. And it helps save the taxpayer money by not putting them in jail, and helps the individual recover.
So your service is rather flexible, and you take in other people with needs. And
We do.
Bartow County Jail sends you.
The
People.
jail sends me a lot of people, and the court sends me a lot of folks. And we also give away free of charge wheelchairs, motorized wheelchairs. I've given away, I think, 5 in the last year. I have 2 sitting on my porch now, ready to give away, no charge.
And are those strictly for Vietnam veterans or any veteran?
Well, primarily for any veteran. And if somebody doesn't have insurance, we'll give them a chair if we've got extra ones. With a priority to veterans. I served for 7 years on the Jail Diversion Trauma Recovery Project for the state, where around the state we set up veterans courts. So, and unfortunately, Judge Nelson at the time didn't think we needed one in Bartow County. So I never could convince him. But now that he's gone, maybe Judge Smith will see that we really need one.
We also help with some Social Security filing too.
I do. I help people. I've been to court 10 or 15 times, and I don't mean to pat myself on the back because the Lord is in it with me, and they happen to be right. So I've won every case so far. If an attorney drops them, we'll take them back to court and win it.
Right.
Hopefully.
Well, do any of the veterans, the Vietnam veterans, because this is an oral history about our tribute to the Vietnam veterans, do they bring you any interesting stories?
They do. They do.
And comes to mind?
Every week we allow in the vet to vet group, they'll stand up and talk about their experiences in Vietnam, and some of them are very interesting, and we actually have a couple of Korean veterans and one World War II veteran that recently came to the group. They're a different breed,
Yeah. Well, can you remember any one particular story that would be worth mentioning here that would help the interview?
Well, the most interesting story that I've run across lately, and I almost laugh when I think about it, but each situation is as serious to that person as the most horrifying situation, like dead bodies and killing people and stuff like that. But this veteran was scared by a cat.
Oh.
And he wakes up at night dreaming about that cat. And so he put in for PTSD because he got scared by a cat. But that's as serious to him as me being shot. So that's kind of when he tells that story, the other guys look at each other.
That's an unusual war testimony
Yeah.
to be frightened by a cat, but I suppose it's legitimate.
It's legitimate to him.
Well, we've somewhat come to an end of our questions, but I want to ask you, do you have any other comments about Vietnam, Bartow County boys or men and women, soldiers that came from Bartow County that had to go and serve and do their duty in that country? Any other comments?
Well, I know that a lot of them were drafted, and they didn't want to be there. I had one soldier that was a conscientious objector, worked for me in Vietnam, and he didn't want to shoot anybody, so I let him stay back, clean the barracks, and do stuff like that. I felt sorry for him. So when I left, I don't know what happened to him, but I know that others went because they wanted to go. I was a career soldier. I actually wanted to go because I wanted to get promoted as fast as I could, and I wanted to get an education. So because of that desire to be better and do better and attain more, I went in out of the 10th grade. So I came out of the service with a PhD because I wanted to go. And there are those that did not want to go because they didn't believe in the war, and I respect them for that. They didn't want to go. So and those that wanted to serve, they went. And I respect them too. So
There is also a memorial next to the courthouse with World War I and II, Korea, Vietnam, and the Gulf War Any thoughts about that? I think there's a brick
Yeah,
for each person.
we sell those bricks here. They're $50 each, and for any service that you served in, and it doesn't have to be in wartime. If you served, I mean, it's just as important for people to be back here loading the ammunition, preparing our food, and doing all that kind of stuff as it is to be out there, excuse me, fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So we sell these bricks, and it's a walk of honor. It's over by the courthouse. And I didn't mention before that we also, several years ago, brought the Vietnam moving wall here to Bartow County. 2 times we brought it here.
And I saw it.
Yeah.
Put it on the Legion ground,
Yep.
as I recall.
It's about time to do it again.
It
Probably it's about time.
I hope you will do it again, because many people can't make it to Washington to see it, and that is so impressive in Washington. And I always go look up the 3 friends that I had
Yeah.
that perished in Vietnam. I think we'd be a bit remiss as we close here. There's been some great movies made about Vietnam. I think of The Deer Slayer and We Were Soldiers Once and Platoon and others. Does that, by any chance, spark any remarks?
Well, unfortunately, I've been unable to watch them. Yeah, some folks can watch them, and I, having buried over 100 folks, it brings back too many memories for me to watch them. So maybe I'll be able to one of these days.
Sure. Well, that's understandable. You are married to who, and who are your children?
Well, I'm married to Evelyn. She was a Hawkins, and I have 3 children, Pete Posten, Melissa Posten, and Derek Posten. Actually, I was born and raised here in Bartow County, and we have a lot of cousins here in Bartow County. My grandfather had 15 brothers and sisters. That's like multi-level marketing. His dad had 18, so.
Sounds like pyramiding to me.
Yeah.
You're native of Bartow County.
Right.
And you were educated here. Tell us something about where you went to grammar school and high school.
Well, I went to this very school.
As you and I both did.
And I went to Douglas Street. I was in part of the time in Cassville High School and Cartersville High School until the 10th grade, when Judge J.L. Davis, you probably remember him, he advised me that I'd be better off in the Army than I would out hanging out with gangs. So that got me started.
So he helped your way into the Army?
He did.
Oh, I see. Well, you also have an entrepreneurial spirit. After the military, you really came back to Bartow, Cartersville, and you've been really involved in several business ventures. Could you just comment on those quickly?
Well, I bought from Bill Benham, who is a veteran and dead now, Judge Benham's brother, who's a Vietnam veteran. Mm-hmm. I bought his business several years ago and started an embroidery business and worked at that for several years. And then when I retired with a decent retirement from the military, so I decided to help veterans. So I started counseling service called Vet to Vet. The VA sent me for training, and we've been doing that ever since. Mm-hmm. We meet every Wednesday night, 6:30, in the old First Baptist Church building. It's now the Bartow County Government Annex.
Right.
So that was primarily what I've been doing since I got out.
Bob, we talked about your education here in Bartow County, and that you and I both attended school here at the old Cherokee Avenue building here. But you went on and finished college and got a PhD, so you're really Dr. Bob Posten. Could you tell us how you arrived to the doctoral status?
Well, after my second tour to Vietnam, I worked for some very influential folks that ended up serving in the White House, and they made sure that that I got taken care of, so to speak. I was given a leave of absence from the military to go to St. Joseph's to get my bachelor's degree. First, I had to get a GED, mm-hmm. which is very important. I got my GED, and then I attended school there for 2 years. And after that, on the weekends, I would go to classes, 3-day classes, University of Oklahoma, for my master's degree in human behavior. And after that, the military paid for my distance learning program again at Valley Christian University. So I obtained my PhD, all paid for by the taxpayers. God bless the taxpayers.
Well, you just reminded me too, when people see you in the community, many of them don't realize you're a doctor, but you're often known for your little dog, your little service dog. What's the name of your dog?
Well, my dog's name is Dot, and unfortunately she passed away 3 days. On the very day I got this surgery on my eyes, she passed away, and that's been hard. It's hard for me to even think about it now, but I'll have another one real soon. She's a therapy dog, and I got that because of my post-traumatic stress disorder, and I was blown out of a foxhole with a concussion grenade, and it gave me a traumatic brain injury, so the dog has been a big help.
Well, Bob, this has been great for you to be a guest of ours for Etowah Valley Historical Society and the Bartow History Museum to conduct this interview and make this known to our public, our members and citizens who would like to know about the Bartow County soldiers that participated in Vietnam. So I'd like to close by saying, Bob, we all thank you for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate the taxpayers.